We have 6 weeks to go until Election Day. And there's new NBC News polling out showing a major shift in the 2024 race. In the latest survey, Vice President Kamala Harris leads former President Donald Trump by 5 points, 49% to 44% among registered voters nationwide. Although that result is within the margin of error, it marks a change from the previous NBC News poll conducted back in July, where Trump led President Joe Biden by 2 points. Since then, Harris has nearly doubled Biden's lead over Trump with women voters, going from 11 points to 21 points. Harris's favorability rating has also soared since July, with 48% of voters now saying they view her positively compared to 32% in the last poll. Trump's favorability has essentially stayed the same since July, with 40% viewing him positively now. Despite being the sitting vice president, Harris leads Trump by 9 points when voters were asked which candidate better represents change. And when asked which candidate they trust more to handle top issues, Trump still leads in most areas, though by smaller margins than in a January poll. Voters trust Trump by 21 points on immigration, by 9 points on the economy, and by 6 points on handling crime. Harris, meanwhile, is trusted more to handle abortion rights by 21 points after Biden led by 12 in January. Joining us now, NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray.
Mark, take us through this. These polls are consistent with a lot of other polls that have shown big momentum in Kamala Harris's direction. Of course, there are always outliers. In 2012, we had Gallup throughout the race saying that Romney was going to beat Obama by 11 points. This year, we have the New York Times Siena poll, which is an outlier. But this NBC poll goes with almost every other poll that shows the wind at Harris's back. Why is that?
Yeah, Joe, our poll ended up showing this is a transformed race. And the last time that we were in the field was back in July. And, of course, so much has happened. Democrats have a new candidate at the top of the ticket. You've had 2 presidential conventions, 2 vice presidential selections, a presidential debate just a couple of weeks ago. And our poll shows that this is a changed race. But 2 things can be true. This can be a changed race where the Democrats now have a little bit of a wind at their backs. But it also can be very, very close. And, Joe, one of the things when you have Kamala Harris more popular than Donald Trump, you end up having Democrats leading on our ballot. You end up having Democrats with a slight lead in congressional ballot. That looks a whole lot like October of 2020 when Joe Biden was running against Donald Trump at the very end of that race, according to our poll. And as we all know, that turned out to be a very close race. And so Democrats should feel very good about this poll and a lot of others that are consistent with those findings, but also I think we should also get ready for another very close election.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, let's dig into some of these numbers here. I was really struck by this, how Harris's favorability has jumped 16 points since July, which is the largest increase for any politician in NBC News polling since George W. Bush got a surge after 9/11. That just speaks how the voters are just viewing her so differently now. It's the biggest jump in 35-odd years. So talk to us a little bit about that, but also drill deep for us about certain key voting blocks. How is she faring in the groups that many people will decide this election, sort of women and voters of color and the young voters?
Yeah, Jonathan, you mentioned our poll ends up showing that 16-point rise in her favorability. That's larger. That's the largest since George W. Bush after 9/11. And when we're talking about a candidate from a major party in a presidential contest, we've never had numbers like that in our 35-year history of our NBC News poll. And so, again, that just shows you how she is transformed, too, since July. And, of course, her ratings since her vice presidency pretty much mirrored what we ended up seeing from President Biden. But her being at the top of the ticket, she is now in a different place, not only that Biden was in, but also where Donald Trump is in popularity. And Jonathan, when we look at the key voting blocks who have moved in this, it is black voters, it is women, and also importantly, young voters too. Harris is doing better with those groups than Joe Biden was doing in July, and that's reflected in our overall ballot score.
Hey, Mark, it's John Heilman here. We talked a lot about Harris's movement here, and obviously, as you say, the race is transformed, and mostly in terms of her versus Joe Biden. Talk a little bit about Donald Trump and whether what we see in these numbers is, again, kind of consistent, as Joe said, with other polling, which is that Trump seems to kind of have, if you look at it, kind of the big takeaway to me is, it looks like we know where Donald Trump stands with this electorate, and he may have kind of hit a ceiling across a lot of different vectors here. Just talk about that.
Yeah, John, what our poll has shown over the course of the last 2 years is how Donald Trump's ballot number really hasn't changed. It's been in this 45, 46, 47% range in every track that we've done going back to 2023. And what has moved has been first Joe Biden's numbers, and now we end up having Kamala Harris. But, John, it's also important to note, again, that with all the kind of the ups and downs, the changes in our poll, this remains a margin of error contest. But we have seen time and time again where Donald Trump, that 46, 47% of figures, that matched his popular vote in 2016. It matched his popular vote in 2020. And it really kind of hasn't budged much. And it's important to remember in 2016, 46, 47% became a winning number, particularly in key battleground states, because of the size of the third-party vote. This time around, this is looking a whole lot more like 2020, where that third-party vote is much smaller, where in key states you might have to get 49, 50% to be able to win.
All right, NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Fascinating numbers. John Heilman, I'm curious, you look at the poll, Mark used the word a transformed race, and it certainly is a transformed race. If you look at every poll, almost every poll that's out there, except, say, for the New York Times Siena poll, which, again, is very consistent with where Gallup was in 2012 throughout the entire campaign, saying that Mitt Romney was going to be the next president of the United States. So you look at the move of all of these polls, and it is transformed, and this NBC poll shows she's doing extremely well. And yet, if you talk to both campaigns, they will still tell you this race is, in fact, a tie. Are you comfortable saying, okay, it may be a tie, but it is a tie that is definitely leaning Harris's way?
I think I put it this way, Joe, which is that if you looked at all these numbers and you talked to the campaigns, I think you would hear that it's a margin of error race, and that's slightly different than a tied race, and that you can, if you played out scenarios, there's a slightly. Harris at this point, I would think most people would agree, is maybe a little bit over 50% chance of winning the race, and Trump has a little under 50, and this is kind of a little bit of an any given Sunday kind of a situation where, no one at this point is comfortable. This is also a national poll, right? And so the campaigns are not paying attention to polling like this anymore. They are looking at battleground state polling. They are looking at those numbers. And I think they all think that all the battleground states are within the margin of error. I think they would also say, and Jonathan, I think you probably hear this in your reporting too, which is that what the Harris campaign would say precisely is, we know this is going to be really close, but we would rather play our hand over these next 6 weeks than their hand, in terms of the money we have, the resources we have on the ground, and the candidate quality that we have. We would rather be us than them, but we understand that it's going to be really tight.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That they feel pretty good about where they are. It's a margin of error race, and we're certainly hearing from the Harris team using the word underdog a lot in all their fundraising appeals, trying to motivate Democrats. Hey, we need you to keep donating. We need you to be out there volunteering. Don't get overconfident. They feel pretty good about her multiple paths to victory, which is certainly something that President Biden, when he was atop the ticket, did not have. He only had that one, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Harris is able to play in the Sun Belt. They feel much better about North Carolina now, particularly because of the implosion of the Republican gubernatorial candidate there, which we'll get to later this morning. One other thing that is striking, though, is how steady Donald Trump's support has been this year. That, yes, he certainly sort of hit his ceiling, but he hasn't really fallen any. He's more popular this time around than he was in 2016 or 2020, which is sort of remarkable when you come to think about it, Joe and Mika, considering all that he has done in the last 8 years. But that's where we are right now, is that both these candidates are about the same place. Trend lines, though, even though it's a margin of error race, trend lines do favor Harris. And that's why her team feels better about where she is heading in these 6 weeks. But, man, it is going to be close.
Well, the trend lines in just about every poll, except for one or two outliers, certainly do break her way. I want to ask you all, based on your reporting, if you're hearing what I'm hearing. Let me, first of all, let's break down these swing states. And, John Heilemann, I'll start with you. This is what I'm hearing right now from the campaigns. Michigan, the Harris campaign feels good about Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Nevada. They know North Carolina and Nevada are still close, but they're feeling good about those states. Pennsylvania and Georgia, toss up. It's just an absolute toss up. Neither side's going to tell you they're going to win or lose those. And right now, the Harris campaign would say they have a lot of work to be done in Arizona. The Trump campaign feeling good about Arizona. What are you hearing, John?
I think that's basically right, Joe. I'd say that that there's all of those are basically what I hear. I would also the few amendments that I'd make are kind of add-ons to those are that Michigan is easily of the three blue wall states the one where the Harris campaign feels most comfortable, and in descending order: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. The Wisconsin electorate it kind of weirds people out a little bit because it's now the oldest, most aging, and whitest of those three states, and so they worry a little bit about the fact that those numbers have given her. They look at the numbers and they feel strong, but there's a lot about Wisconsin that makes people, of those three blue wall states, makes them that seem a little bit out of whack. Pennsylvania, everyone assumes is going to be crazy close, and we won't know the answer to there until about a week after Election Day, probably. And they're not feeling super confident about Georgia. And I don't know if you mentioned that one. North Carolina, obviously, the Mark Robinson thing is breaking in a way that they like. I think Arizona, because of that abortion, because of the abortion initiative that's on the ballot. Though they're not in the strongest position and they do have work to do there, they think they can do that work there because the abortion initiative opens up a pathway that could make Arizona good for very close and kind of tilting back towards Harris's direction again. John?
Yeah, my reporting largely lines up with that. A few additional notes. The Harris team does feel best about Michigan, which is striking considering like 6 months ago we thought Michigan was the blue wall state slipping away because of the war in Gaza and how that might affect the Muslim and Arab American population there. That's not been the case. They feel good about Michigan. Wisconsin, to John's point, they know is close, but they feel like they're up a little bit. Pennsylvania, by far. Pennsylvania is the state that keeps Democrats up at night. That they feel like this is going to be the hardest of those states to win. It is not impossible, but it's difficult for her to get a path through 70 without Pennsylvania. They worry about some of the older white voters there. Expect to see President Biden camp out in Pennsylvania in the next couple of weeks, trying to help her get across the finish line. They're also going to need big turnouts there in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and those suburbs. North Carolina, as just noted, they're feeling a lot better about. Georgia, they think is more or less tied. Maybe they're down a little, but they recognize it's going to be harder this time around than in 2020. They feel like 2020 got to the Democratic column a little ahead of schedule for Georgia. And then the last two, I would just say this. Arizona is the one that I think Democrats are actually a little disappointed by. They thought because of that abortion measure, they'd have more of a shot there. They're not ruling it out by any means, but that's the one that is the hardest that it looks like for them. Nevada, the polling's not great for Democrats, but there's sort of this belief that at the end of the day, Nevada always looks hard for Democrats, and at the end it snaps into place by a point or two. So there's some real hope that could happen again. But I'll flag one more thing. The path to 270 that President Biden got and was going to have to get was Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then that one vote out of Nebraska, that congressional district in Omaha. And we're seeing the Republicans here just 6 weeks out trying yet again to change the law there. So Nebraska could be winner take all, depriving Democrats of that one vote. There's a sense they likely won't be successful, but that's something to keep an eye on, too.